Good morning. My name is Jennifer D. Mudd, and I am the Executive Director of the Manufacturing Growth Alliance, also known as MGA. We are a statewide membership-based organization that champions, serves, and advocates for Michigan's small manufacturers as we drive solutions that make manufacturing in Michigan the most competitive and prosperous in the nation. Welcome to part 3 of a 3-part series we have been offering in October to acknowledge manufacturing and to support small manufacturers. Our conversation today will focus on managing a multi-generational workforce. The agenda for the next hour is as follows. We'll have welcome and introductions to our panelists. We will then transition into a discussion between our facilitator and the panelists to provide you with content. Throughout the conversation, we encourage you to type questions into the chat box located at the bottom of your screen. We will close with a review and wrap up. Here are a few housekeeping items before I introduce you to our facilitator today. Please have your technology on mute throughout our conversation. Just a note that we are recording the conversation to be distributed within the next few days. Again, feel free to use the chat box throughout the next hour. We'll try to get to all the questions today. If we are unable to get to your question, please be assured that we will circle back to you with an email after the webinar and provide you with a response. Now, I'd like to introduce you to the facilitator of today's conversation. Dan Peet is Board Secretary and Treasurer of the Manufacturing Growth Alliance. He is also a Senior Director of Business Development at Connexus Group. Dan has served in a variety of leadership roles since 2012 at Connexus Group, from directing the business and economic development teams to delivering customized trainings for employers. In addition to that, he and his wife own and operate a craft hard cider manufacturing company called Peet's Original Cider, which has a production space in Paw Paw and a tap room / bowling alley in Stevensville. Thank you, Dan, for facilitating our conversation today.
Thanks so much for the intro, Jen. I appreciate it. It's my honor to also turn it over to our other panelists to help introduce themselves and maybe give some of their background and why they've got a little bit of things to say about some of the different activities that go into managing that multi-generational workforce. So Eric, why don't we turn it over to you?
Great, thanks. Thanks for the invitation. I'm glad to be here sharing a conversation with everybody. My name is Eric, and I lead a company called Getman Corporation, and we're a local family-owned business that's been around for about 65 plus years. We're an OEM, so we original equipment manufacturer for underground mobile mining equipment, which we really ship all over the world. So about 80% of our volume is international. We're located in Bangor, Michigan, but we have a second plant in Comstock right outside of Kalamazoo. We got about 160 people that kind of all work together to get it done. And the average age of our employees in the context of the topic is mid-40s. And we certainly have representation across the different generations. We also have folks from about 12 different countries. So we also have somewhat geographically diverse representation in our workforce. For me personally, I've been here about 15 years, about half the time doing this in this role. But as I was reflecting back, I have about 30 years of experience, coming up on 30 years, 27 of which has been managing people, from a dozen people to 800 people. So in retail and distribution and manufacturing. So kind of runs the gamut. So if I've not learned a ton over the time, I certainly have seen a ton, and happy to learn about the other folks and have a conversation today. So thank you.
Great. Thanks for that, Eric. And Kelly, you're up next.
Hi there, I'm Kelly Haynes, and I'm with Axios HR. Axios is a human resource company that helps small businesses, primarily under a couple hundred employees, but we do have clients that are larger than that as well. We help people in the realm of human resources. So this is a great topic for us because we work with manufacturers. We also do work with service-based businesses and professional firms as well from a human resource perspective. We are based here in West Michigan in Grand Rapids, but we serve clients all over Michigan and actually all over the United States. We're in about 8 different states as well, helping small businesses with their human resources. And we have about 450 to 475 clients at any one given time. Again, ranging from manufacturing to service-based business, but it's all about people. And multi-generations is definitely, and probably, I would say, every single one of our clients. So, and I've been with the company for 30 years. I was one of the shareholders, and in 2012, we sold our business to our employees. So we're 100% employee owned at this point. So.
Very cool. Thank you for that. And last but not least, Ed.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dan. It's great to be here. I'm honored to be part of this group. My name's Ed Holinsky. I've focused on culture and transformation in organizations. My experience has been multifaceted. I started in sales and business development, ran a few business units, started an e-learning business within a larger organization, and found I had a penchant for doing startups, turnarounds, and helping businesses at inflection points. Mid-career for me, though, I made a shift and went into learning and organizational development. I worked for a company called Marsh McLennan out of New York, and I worked for the chief learning officer for about 8 years. We did a couple major transformations while we were there together, working with the CEOs. I later ran a global learning and development function for Mercer, its outsourcing business. So I had 35 people that were part of that practice globally. And we did a transformation with the CEO there over a couple of year period of time. Since then, I've done a number of different things, many of which were consulting with leaders on transforming their organizations, enhancing cultures, and building capabilities for those organizations, sometimes inside the organization, sometimes outside as a consultant working with them. So today I do a couple things. I have a role where I advise CEOs through a company called Vistage, but I also work through Shepherd Advisors to provide culture change for predominantly mid-sized organizations. And we've done some really interesting projects where we've had to look at the cultural divides based on generational differences, how to account for that, how to make the culture more friendly toward different generations with different expectations, and how to meld those together in a way that's productive. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation today and learning from my fellow panelists at the same time.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Ed, and thanks for everybody for sharing your kind of your individual background and how you're coming to this conversation. So with that, we'll jump into the Q&A. And just as a reminder, anyone in the audience there, please do drop any questions you might have in the chat box. We'll be looking out for those. That said, we've also got some kind of set questions. So I'll start with maybe a bit of an easy one. What, in your experience, what are some best practices that you've seen related to managing a multi-generational workforce? I'll kind of turn that over to whoever's ready.
Well, I guess I can go first. We're all waiting for each other to unmute, but for us, I think best practice really is in the integration of the different generations, right? I mean, I think creating an opportunity for people to work closely together and share experiences and participate. I think that for us, it's been a best practice. So I think typically, if you think on the manufacturing floor, somebody comes in and works in their workstation, maybe has some limited exposure to other folks, or if they're in kind of a professional job up in the front, Again, they're kind of heads down doing their individual contributor work. But we've really tried to create an opportunity for people to work together, to get together and collaborate, whether it's related to their work or even outside of their work. So we have a number of employee groups that get together to meet on different topics, and that gives a chance for people to share ideas and to share thoughts and get to know each other. And regardless of the generation, then just creates a connection between people to be able to learn and share. So it's been effective for us.
Yeah, I like that. I liked some of the stories you were telling me earlier too, that it's more built into part of your culture rather than a lot of individualized initiatives. It's kind of a sum of all as opposed to one small activity. So,
Okay.
Ed, maybe what have you seen with some of your clients related to
Yeah,
that
I
question?
think a best practice, Dan, for me is building on what Eric said. It is that ability and creating space to have personal connections with folks. I think what we've seen through the pandemic has sort of reframed the way people think about relationships with employees and colleagues. We're doing things faster and we're more flexible than we've ever been out of necessity. And I think it's also created connections that are very different from what we had in the workplace, where people would come in and wear sort of a veneer, about certain things they would share, certain things they wouldn't. And we've all come to now know each other in our own habitat, right? And as a result of that, many leaders are connecting differently with employees than they have in the past. There's an authenticity there. There's a sort of casual and relaxed exchange within colleague groups and with leaders. And that's a best practice. I hope we can continue that, and not step back into what we had before, because it's actually better to have people relate in different ways and to know what's going on with their families, whether they have a pet, Jen, with them while they're on the line. Those are all interesting things. I talked with a former colleague yesterday who is leaving and going to a new organization, and she had a conversation with the CEO on the way out. And essentially, he was asking her questions he'd never asked before, and she's been there 4 years. And she said to me, had he taken the time to ask that somewhere along the way, he didn't even know I had kids. She said, I might still be there today versus going on to a different organization. So for me, it's all about creating that connection, knowing people, knowing who they are, what they're about personally, and really caring, in a way where you take the time to understand that versus focusing exclusively on the work without factoring in the people.
Great, thanks. And Kelly, I know you guys have probably a lot of clients who have had, issues or opportunities with this across the board. Have you got maybe some best practices you've seen from your lens?
Yeah, thank you very much. I do have some best practices, and some of the things that we help our clients with and we've seen happen. We're in a great position because we see lots of different organizations, different sizes, and different industries. But if you really talk about at the core, some of the best practices is making sure, as the gentlemen have said, making sure that we have the right connection with people. But it's also offering opportunities for learning about communication. A lot of organizations that we work with do some personality profiling, whether that be Myers-Briggs or be others that are out there, and they spend time educating people about how each person on their team communicates and that kind of how they're wired. And we really find that is helpful in building a bridge and being impactful to say, kind of getting rid of the labels of generations and really talking about how it's not a generational thing, it's maybe just a communication style. And if we understand the communication style between individuals, no matter what generation, we find that there's probably more commonality than there is differences. And it's just the delivery method may be different. So we spend a lot of time working, and particularly in manufacturing environments, working with team leads and supervisors on communication skills and understanding that it could be a generational communication method, but when you get to the core of it, it really is the individual. And if you can make those connections, as Eric said, or Ed said, I'm sorry, when someone was leaving, if the person said, geez, if they would have asked me this, years ago or months ago, I wouldn't be in possibly leaving. I'm sorry, my phone.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point too, that it sometimes can be kind of lazy, like, oh, they're chalking it up to they're young, or, when it's, you've only tried the way that you like to communicate with this person. So, it may have nothing to do with their age, that they're young or old. It can have a lot to do with the fact that you're only trying one way, to connect with that person.
Yeah, and I have one more thing that we've found that has been very successful in kind of breaking the barriers between generations, and that's really coming up, particularly on the manufacturing floor, coming up with a mentorship program. One, it helps the very experienced workforce that's been there for a long, long time show their value and the experience that they have to a younger generation, and the younger generation gets huge value from that because they're learning from people that have actually been doing it for multiple years. So the organizations, we have several that have a mentorship program, whether it's for the first month, first 6 weeks, it could be 6 months, that they really have a person that is their buddy, that they're to help train and retain. It really has worked out quite well.
That's great. Yeah, great best practice. Changing gears a little bit, and I'll stick with you on this one, Kelly, if you would, what are maybe some of the common mistakes that you see? Maybe they try to do that and they don't communicate very well. And then what happens?
Couple of the most common mistakes that I find is organizations that tend to label generations. It really is somewhat offensive to all the generations, whether you're in the boomer age or whether you're a millennial. Any type of conversation that I've had by that, every single generation has some type of reaction in a negative sense to how they're being labeled in a generation. So we try to promote people getting rid of the labels from generation, and again, getting to the communication piece of it. One of the other things that I see is one of the failures or mistakes that people make is they tend to sometimes take their best performers from a technical standpoint and move them into some type of leadership role. And they don't have any leadership skills, and they haven't had the right support to be able to really move into that leadership role. So we always try to help our organizations to say, it's great to promote people from within. You want people to have a career growth, but you can't just promote a person because they have great technical skills and they know exactly how to run the machines or how to do whatever you're doing without the support of a leader. It really gets down to one-on-one communication and one-on-one development. I think kind of the old adage is people don't leave organizations, they leave their leader or they leave their manager. So a mistake could be promoting a person who, one, potentially has never had the leadership background before without giving them the proper support. Again, it's not that they can't move into being a great leader, a great supervisor, a great team lead, whatever the title may be, but they definitely need to have the support to go along with that.
Yeah, and I've personally seen that's not a generational or an age-based transition too.
Right.
It could be someone
Exactly.
who's across the board. So in general, that's great feedback. Ed or Eric, do you guys have anything to kind of add to maybe the common mistakes or oh man, I did this, don't do that type experience?
Yeah, I think building on one of Kelly's points for me, I think the biggest mistake many leaders and organizations make is to be dismissive of younger generations. There's a bit of prejudging that's not helpful. And as a result of that, they get confirmation bias, where they look for some data points that reinforce the way they think about those people. And I encourage folks to come with the mindset that we can learn from others, you know, irrespective of their age and what their experience has been, you know, that there's something there that you can pick up from them that'll be useful. You'll be better for that. They'll be better for that as a result of the exchange. In fact, you know, some of our clients I work with, we're talking about reverse mentoring programs, Kelly, building on your point, where as they learn the business from people that have been around for a while, they can also share some things from a technology perspective that are useful, because many of us, you know, aren't as savvy as the younger generation is, who've grown up as sort of digital natives. And it's helpful to share that both ways. And it helps to reframe the mindsets to say there's something there for everybody, right? If we just listen and pay attention, we can learn from every employee in the organization.
Yeah, if I can, I think as, well, just to add a little bit to what Ed and Kelly are saying, I think what we found is that, you know, if you think about it over a longer period of time, like maybe a decade or 15 years, we transitioned some of our policies and our practices toward more technologically advanced, you know, some more things online and some more app-based programs to get information, providing information through email or text, you know, providing these. And I think a mistake is moving to that one platform, because maybe the newer folks coming in might be more technologically advanced. And then the mistake is just believing that we're going to have to force other folks that aren't as well adapted to that technology to adapt, right? And so this is kind of the approach of, we want to cater more to younger, more technologically advanced employees or folks of the generation that's a little bit easier to. And I think what we found out to be much more effective is to think about what the different generations, no labels, just this kind of stage of life, what those folks need to receive the message or to engage with the company, or to like fill out benefits forms or apply for vacation or get reimbursement. Not everybody is gonna, you can't just move from an old style to a new style and expect everybody to adapt. I think that's a mistake. So for example, when we talk about health insurance and kind of administering that, we certainly have online programs where folks can get support, but then folks can also come in to the office if they prefer a more personal approach and ask questions because they don't want to access that through technology. We even allow for meetings with spouses to learn about health benefits and what's available to make sure that the entire family is engaged if that's what's needed. So I think the mistake is just kind of moving to one platform, and I think you know, best practice is to be able to understand what the different age groups and cohorts need to be able to get the message and be able to communicate with the company. I think that's been effective.
Yeah, great additions. Thank you. So let's talk about a little bit of some of these things that are either maybe it's a good way to practice them, driven by COVID and kind of the changes of more of a remote workforce, like it or not, more technology. Normally we may have been having in this meeting right now, face to face, right? Instead, it's tuned in. There's some good options with that too, and there's some downside. Do you all see any challenges or opportunities at play that are maybe age group cohort based? And I'll throw an easy one out there from my own personal experience. My wife and I are, you know, on the younger end. We're kind of in the millennial group. We've got 3 little kids. It's not easy right now to be a work from home parent. You may notice I'm actually at our tap room that Jen talked about in my intro, and I got a 4-year-old sitting over there that I'm hoping, you know, doesn't run out of snacks by the end of this call. So there are different challenges depending on where you're at in that stage of life, as Eric was talking about. And maybe, you know, this leans a little bit too, Ed, on how you were saying it's allowed people to have more of an insight into, you know, what people's home life is like, to maybe gain a better perspective or understanding. Do any of you have anything to add where maybe with COVID kind of coming into this, right, in the middle of a lot of this technological change, how has that impacted this topic?
Yeah, I do, Dan. I'd like to build on what Eric said and answer your question. I think the companies that really seem to be doing well are those that sort of personalize and tailor the approach to what the needs are. So similar to what he's doing with benefits. You know, I've heard stories of some of the organizations I work with where they're building learning pods, you know, because the biggest challenge for a lot of parents today is to try to multitask and help their kids while they're at home, going to school online or virtually while doing their full-time job. You know, and the smart employers are saying, isn't there a role for us to play? Can't we help them and maybe bring in a teacher that would work with a heterogeneous group, but to create some discipline that might help them so they can focus on their job. So there's a bit about taking the time to understand, you know, what the needs are, how you can best support them. Most of us are trying to do the best we can. We've all got different challenges, right? And the more you can learn about how you can support that and help them through that, the greater loyalty you build with those employees and the more productive the organization becomes.
That's great.
I'd add to what Ed said is being really flexible. You just have to be flexible, and you have to try to accommodate everybody as much as possible. We've had clients actually that have even opened up mini daycare centers where they have opened up their conference room to having children come in, and it's supervised for periods of time. I mean, obviously there's some legal things that you need to go through, make sure that you're in compliance and all that kind of thing, all those type of things. But it's been successful. And I think more and more businesses are going to be thinking of those things. How can they offer more flexibility and a benefit where maybe there's time that the people do need to be in their office, but they need to bring their children along during that time? Can they go into a conference area or a different portion of the facility and have a little bit of supervised time while their parent is in a meeting that they have to be in, et cetera?
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that, Kelly. For me, I will tell you that, you know, pre-COVID, I guess I was a little bit more traditional, I guess, in terms of the approach related to policies and things like working at home and you know, having a wide variety of offerings. Certainly intellectually understood it, and certainly I was making the transition. But wow, COVID, it was really almost overnight. You realized that you had to talk to every single person and find out what is it that they are struggling with. What is it that they need to manage? And it's not that we're going to solve all of those, right? But having the flexibility to meet them where they are, and they, to a person, they want to be there. They want to engage. They want to do good work. They want to contribute. They want their life to be, you know, as much as normal as possible. But they need the support. So we've spent so much time, the HR group and the management team, myself, really focused on what the individual person needs and how can we not necessarily accommodate that only, but understand it, appreciate it, allow some flexibility. And it really, you talk about the child care and the kids and the education, that's absolutely there. We have some folks that are kind of in the sandwich generation that have that, but they also have older parents that they're taking care of.
Mm.
We've got folks in all generations that are kind of on their own, and you know, now they're on their own in their house for long periods of time. So that presents different challenges and requirements on us. So that increased flexibility, wow, that's really key. And it requires, of course, you to reach out to people, to talk to them, understand it, and really bring that back in, and then see how you can support that. So it's been a lot of work, but it's been a rewarding part of this, I guess.
Yeah, very, very good.
What we found in COVID, most of our manufacturing clients, not all, but most, have continued to be functioning and operating all through COVID because they've been able to move their product line to something that if it wasn't already essential, it is essential. So that has brought some unique things. There's a lot of, in the office setting, technology now is much more conducive to be able to work remotely and all over the world. But in the manufacturing setting, it's, you know, I have clients that say, Kelly, we have to produce things. We have to have people here. And so what they've learned is not only getting more intentional in their communication, more accommodating for flexibility, they've also thought about how can they look differently at getting the work completed, whether that is shifting hours, doing job share, lots of different activities related to being just much more flexible. Looking for, I have one client that said, we're going to go to different shifts for a period of time. And they sat down with their staff and said, what is going to work for each one of the families that we have working here? And they came up with a plan together as a group that they can still get their production out the door on time, but it's done much different than the standard 7 to 3, 3 to 11, whatever the 8 to 5 schedule would be. And it's really getting more to making sure that the objective is met versus the process and how the objective is met, and meaning, again, the time frame of person clocking in at 3 and leaving at 11. They've just become much more flexible. And I think what they've learned in turn is that probably after COVID, they're probably not going to go back to where they were, because it's been successful. And the people who are actually working in the jobs are the ones that help design what that work schedule looked like.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. So one thing that is a unique challenge to the manufacturing business more than others is more than a quarter of manufacturing workers are older than 55. So it's just in general an older workforce. It's not presented with some of these other challenges, and you add to that it's a production environment. We manufacture hard cider. If someone's not there to move it between tanks and to make sure the ferment's going, it's not going to get produced. It really does require to have people physically present. And as we look at the different kind of age gaps, what are you all seeing in terms of some ways that manufacturers specifically have looked at, boy, we need to attract maybe younger or more diverse talent in general, because we can't keep going back to the same pools. And now maybe even some of those pools are pretty disrupted during COVID. So maybe I'll turn that over to you guys.
Maybe I'll jump in and answer the specific question. We really try to tie ourselves to a number of different organizations. So we participate in the general community with Manufacturing Day. So we have folks in from the school system, and we give tours and we talk about manufacturing really in a way to promote that as a viable career, because it is great. We also will participate with Western. So we have a number of interns that come in. We have had interns from Ferris who are in the heavy truck program. We've gone to welding schools and participated in events that they have. And then of course we do a lot of job fairs, at least when they had them. So we participate in that way. So we try to get out there. As an underground equipment manufacturer, I mean, we're largely invisible to everybody,
Yeah.
Unless you work underground somewhere overseas. So we really have to get out there and make ourselves known. I will say, in recent years, maybe in the last 5 years, we find it a little bit easier to find folks to move into who are interested in the professional trades than maybe even 10 years ago. There seems to be a more openness to it, a desire to to be more directly connected with the work and to be able to make things. So in the last few years, it's not been too bad. And people are excited about, that do that work, and they're coming in at the beginning of their career. They seem to be excited to be there as opposed to it being kind of second choice. So that's been nice. But that's how we build connections. Yeah.
And I think, Dan, from my perspective, there's a bit about all the things Eric said, in terms of the connection points, the touch points, getting out there. But there's also a bit about the way you frame your story to make it compelling for younger generations. There's a macro issue around manufacturing is a good thing. If it's one of the lessons we take from this pandemic, you need to be able to make things right here in order for us to get along as a society. So I think there's a bit of reframing we can do there and have a little bounce in our step about building things. Smart people should make things, not just move money, in order for us to be innovative. And then I think on a micro level, each business has some social element that's valuable. And I think leaders have to get clear on in terms of how they create societal value along with generating revenues and profits, and play that up with people so that they understand that value and feel good about what they're doing to contribute to society, right? Whether that's essential services or bringing joy to life in a different way because they do something else. There's something there, a story that needs to be told that will make people feel a little better about stepping into that organization and that industry.
And the thing I would add to that as well, and both Eric and Ed hit on it, is really getting to promoting your why. You do things, you manufacture things, but what's the why behind it? Who is it helping? How are you delivering something good for the environment or good for mankind or whatever, just good for living every single day? That's really, really important. And the second thing is showing what their growth potential can be. I don't think, and at least in Michigan, over the past 25, 30 years, manufacturing really in the educational system got to be where if you weren't going on to college, you're going to get a 2-year or 4-year degree. It wasn't, at least this is where my children have come back to me and said, that wasn't the cool thing to do. It was, you had to go on and get an education. It wasn't to go into manufacturing, until they saw a lot of their friends come out and say, geez, they're in an awesome career making a lot of money and never went on and got a 2 or a 4-year degree. So we have to make it show people what their career progression can be within an organization. They may not be ready to go to school today, but 5-10 years into working in a manufacturing environment, they may say, I want to go back to school, and gosh, my employer is going to pay for me to help get some certifications or get some other type of engineering education, etc. So I think we just have to make it show the younger generation that it is a cool industry to be in, that we do actually make impact in people's lives, and what can be my professional growth opportunities within the organization.
That's great. Yeah, thanks. And then on the flip side of that, how might manufacturers, especially, during this time, how might they best position themselves, if it's any different at all, to folks that are maybe towards the tail end of their career, or at least when they would like to be working?
I can
It's an
jump in.
interesting question.
Oh,
Go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Ed, sir.
Yeah. I think I'll go back to some of the previous conversations, right? That there is a bit about individualizing, right? We all are at different points along our career spectrum. And I think if you're talking with the kind of interests that we talked about earlier and showing the kind of flexibility and not stereotyping, I think when you write people off at the older ages and say they can't learn, they're not interested in advancing themselves, that's a big mistake, right? There are some people that like to learn continuously, right? And they may like to learn a new trade. They may like to take on a new role inside an organization. So don't stifle them by making assumptions about them that may or may not be valid. And I think give them the same sort of flexibility that Kelly was talking about, to have some growth, to do some things, take on some new challenges, maybe help some others in the organization in different ways if they've got some things to share. But ask them, right, what they'd like to do in order to make a bigger contribution for the organization, given their experiences, and then see where that goes. Be willing to experiment with them.
Yeah, I love that. I was gonna say something very similar, and I think it really comes down to you think about growth opportunities for folks that are entering their career, but we find that folks that have been in the company for a long period of time, or have been doing the same job at different companies for a long period of time, they also, just because of the fact that they've been doing it for so long, are looking for something else. Right, or if it's a manufacturing job that's physically demanding, they get to a point where it's not as easy for them to do that job as maybe it was when they got started. So, as I'd mentioned, finding opportunities for those folks to contribute in different ways, or additional ways, maybe is a better way to say that. And then I think it's always a good lesson to understand that people can, in the same job, they can contribute different things at different levels, whether it's knowledge or productivity or output or efficiency or quality or whatever that may be. Everybody kind of brings something a little bit different to it. And I think really good supervisors that know their folks and know what the people can contribute, understand and can manage people differently. If they're in the different points of their career, can provide learning opportunities for some of the folks that are just coming up, but also can understand what might be some new limitations for folks that have been really very good at their job and been doing it a while, but maybe are starting to see some limitations. So.
Excellent point. Kelly, did you have anything you want to add to that too?
Yeah, I think what I would add to it is, just as an employer, again, be really flexible. I think that the old mindset of X amount of hours a week during X period of time is really not out the window, but can be adapted to be much more flexible, where you can bring in a outstanding, probably well overqualified individual that is retired or semi-retired, but still would like to do something a couple days a week. And that's invaluable to have within your organization, and partnering those up then with the younger generation that maybe didn't get some of the trade schooling that they would have prior, can really help build the next group underneath them.
Yeah, can I add something, Dan, to what Kelly had mentioned?
Go for it. Yeah.
We routinely will hire folks that are a few years away from the end of their career, who have a long history of success, and just as well as we can hire folks that are in mid-career or early career. So we really take a look at that position and the people that are interested in potentially joining the company, and selecting what might be the best fit, regardless of the point in their career. And as I talk to folks who also run manufacturing organizations, I think there's a bias toward wanting somebody who's earlier in their career. But when you take that away and you enable yourself or the organization to bring in people that might be at any stage in their career, you really then end up developing that multi-generational piece, right? I mean, I think when you bring in somebody that might be 3 years away from retirement as a new employee, and you introduce them to the group of people that are there, there really is no better way to say that you value experience, and you're open to people with different experiences in different age groups, than to bring a new employee in like that. And then it's interesting because you got the role reversal. Then maybe the younger folks who are part of the team now know the company, and are training somebody who might be a little bit more advanced in their career on the company, even though that person might be technically excellent at what they at their particular job. So it really speaks to what Kelly was saying, and I think it's an important piece to recognize that you don't have to attract you don't always have to just attract young people. I mean, there are a lot of people out there that are super skilled and could be a good fit and want to work and can. So.
Mhm. Great points, guys. I think everything you brought up there kind of hinges on the requirement that people are good communicators, right? To hit the different notes, or the way with which you should communicate, or the behaviors you ought to demonstrate. In general, do you all feel manufacturers are pretty good communicators, or where do you kind of see the talent pool as it relates to hitting those notes?
I
Go ahead,
think
Kelly.
I think I find that sometimes some manufacturers don't feel like they need to spend as much time communicating to the folks that are on the plant floors. They spend a lot of time within their professional setting, in whether that's engineering or in the office, in communication. But because of the nature of being in a production environment, sometimes it is difficult. So the folks who really make it intentional spend time. I have a client of ours does a weekly, goes and sits in the lunchroom for every single lunch break and answers questions, and has sit down with Mike, ask me whatever question there is. And he just really takes that time to connect. So some people are good at it, some people are not so good at it. I think the areas that I know we have the biggest challenge with our clients that have turnover, the link gets to communication with their direct supervisor. And again, I said this earlier, sometimes we promote people who are best at doing a position, but not necessarily have great leadership skills and great communication skills. So when we promote them without giving them that support, sometimes it doesn't go very well. They're very knowledgeable, but they don't know how to train people, and they don't know how to develop and retain individuals. So I find more and more people are focusing more on the retention piece of it than the attraction piece of it. And if you can retain your staff, yes, you grow and you need to add positions, but if you retain your staff, you grow your people. Those businesses are the ones to deal with a low unemployment environment that we've had up until recently, but still I would consider it a pretty low unemployment environment.
Yeah, the question, Dan, is framed in an interesting way to me. I had to process that and think about it, whether they're good communicators or not. I think if you look at what the agenda has been and is in many production facilities, they've been efficient communicators, right? They've told people what they need to do and how they need to do it in order to make things work in the organization. I think as we shift societally, they have to become more expansive, right? There's a bit about sharing the broader purpose of the organization, how the work connects to that purpose, how that helps the individual, helps the organization, and helps others. So there is some work to do, and it's not that they've been poor communicators, it's just that it's been a different environment, right? And they were serving a different purpose at the time. And I think a lot of people are looking for something a little different today. So it's going to take time and attention for them to become more expansive and share things that they hadn't thought were that important before, but are increasingly important for many employees.
Great context, Eric. I see you there too, unmuted.
Yeah, I mean, I love what Ed and Kelly said. I mean, I think it's right. I mean, it's so hard. I remember, I have a distinct memory of answering the phone with a customer and getting a little bit different direction from the customer on their truck than we had anticipated. It was going to be a big change for us. I went down to talk to who was our director of engineering at that time. Told him about the change, and his response was, "Why am I always the last to know?" I literally just hung up with the customer and walked down and talked to him. There's this kind of bias toward, you just assume you're just not being told stuff, right? I mean, so the default is I'm not being communicated. So it's really difficult to be able to share everything that everybody needs at any time, knowing where that line is. And so yeah, it's something that we work on all the time, and we'll always work on. We try to do the best we can, and I think part of being a good communicator is being honest with people, and just being honest when you have a miss. You just say, "Yeah, we should have shared that," and sometimes you share too much information, and you just kind of deal with that too. So
Yeah.
it's a process.
That's great. I love that story too. I'm always the last to know. We, that's a big thing that with the Manufacturing Growth Alliance, and I know, other people on this call too, that's what we really want to help with. If that's such a big opportunity and challenge, maybe we spend just our last few minutes here talking through what are some of the things that seem to work well? Eric, what do you do differently now, if anything, specifically that some other manufacturer tuning in on this could say, wow, I'm going to test that. What's something that you try to do differently so your director of engineering isn't the last to know now?
Yeah. Well, I'll share something that I do personally. So certainly I have monthly meetings with everybody that was hired in that month. So over the course of the year, I'll have lunch with everybody in the company and have an opportunity to meet and talk with folks. That's a nice way to personally connect. But in my company-wide meetings, which I have monthly also, which is with the entire company, I share some of the good things that are going on, and I share some of the not so good things that are going on, some of the challenges and risks and vulnerabilities. And, I don't want to say mistakes, but if we have a mistake that we share, we talk about it. And, I tell folks, this is what this is for. It's for me to be transparent about what's going on in the business, good or bad, and to be able to share that. I think not all of it is relevant for everybody. But over the course of time, I think the employees recognize that, oh, Eric is going to be transparent enough and willing to be vulnerable enough to share those things that other companies might not share, right? And I think that just that act itself builds a connection. And then when I have conversations with people and I share things with them or communicate policy changes or different approaches or benefits, I think then the assumption is, yeah, okay, he's been transparent all along. He's kind of presenting the truth as it is. Then hopefully they can recognize that, give me the benefit of the doubt that I'm approaching it in a sincere and honest way. So that's something that I do specifically to try to build that the underlying integrity of my communication with the entire company, so that there's a trust that they have of me when I'm communicating. So
It's great. Yeah.
hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Thanks. And then maybe some other good, just tactical heads up you think, Kelly or Ed, that you could.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think that one of the things that we try to do is communicate the same message often and in different methods. Sometimes we'll even we'll send an email on something, we'll have a meeting on something, and then we'll follow it up with a cute video or something that is reinforcing. So it's just like in any marketing, what do they say? You have to see something 7 or 8 times before you recognize it again. It's the same within organizations. They have to hear the same method or the same message in different methods. So we have employers and then ourselves, we do quarterly meetings, we do monthly emails, we send out videos, we have our leaders going into team meetings. So it's just the repetition of the message, I think, is also really, really important.
That's great.
So I'll be a little provocative on this one, Dan. I think when we say communications, typically our minds go immediately to what we're sharing in the way of information, how much we're sharing, and how we're sharing that. And for me, increasingly, communications means listening. I think to be a great leader, you've got to become more skilled at listening. You've got to ask questions that help you get to where people are at and understand them, and then be a facilitator to sort of coalesce the thinking of the organization in a skillful way where you help to build a shared vision in the organization. So while all those things are important, the ongoing communication, the sharing many times, and doing it in different ways so people understand where the organization is at. If you don't have that capability to have the interest, curiosity, openness to really dive into what other people are thinking, you're probably going to miss a significant component that's important for the organization.
That's great. Good close there too, Ed, on how communication goes both ways. They're going to tell you, you're going to tell them something, they're going to tell you something. You got to do something about what they told you too.
Yeah.
Even if it's, I understand it, I acknowledge I can't do anything about it, but I can do this instead or something else.
Yep.
But,
Exactly.
yeah, I really appreciate all those comments from everybody there. Just kind of doing our time check. We've got just a few minutes left here. And so I wanted to give a last chance. Does anyone want to offer any closing thoughts before I share the contact us and we wrap up? No? Okay, well, I would
I'm good.
personally like to thank all of you for your participation. I love the comments in the chat box that we received today as well. Just as a reminder, we will be sharing this out via email and posting on our website as well. And you all have the opportunity to do that and share it with your teams too. We really hope that you found value in this conversation. And I know that I did personally. I had a good time. Looking forward to catching up with all you guys in different ways, maybe around over a cider or something someday too. So anyway, you can see our contact that we'll share, and looking forward for more future roundtables and webinars through MGA. So thanks again to our panelists.
Great.
Thank you.
All
Thanks,
right,
Dan.
cheers.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
See you, everybody.
Bye.